right now, when you think about AI and when you think about, the market dynamics right now, there are so many novel challenges that if you do not find a way to make peace with your relationship with whether or not you're creative, you can lose. Like, that's just like the straight up truth, right? So right now, I think what's important is, really understanding that there's some things that you can use to your advantage in order to actually help you be more creative in a less intimidating way. So one thing as an example, a lot of organizations have these like resource constraints, right? So let's say you have a layoff and at one point you had 3 people doing 3 distinct jobs and now you only have one person and it's, you, unfortunately. So it's like, okay, in that scenario, how can I be creative with the resources that I have, right? And a lot of times some of the best solutions have been because there were constraints.
Happy Tuesday. It is day 2 in our Christmas week of daily episodes here on Leading with Integrity. And today I'm joined by Melissa Llarena, best-selling author, leadership storyteller, speaker, and many more. I mean, there's a nearly endless list of achievements, work that Melissa has done. I'll let her tell the story herself in a moment. We'll be talking about the power of the fertile imagination and how you as a leader can build that, create the environment for that to exist and succeed in your team as well as in yourself. The value of creativity, of innovation, it's talked about a lot in business. It's rare to find someone who has actual practical ideas, though, for a leader looking to create that in their organization. So that is what you'll be getting today with Melissa. Do remember, stay till the end or check the show notes for links to Melissa's website, learn more about her. And if you'd like to work with her or seek her help, you'll find all the information to do so. If you are enjoying this podcast so far, whether this is the first episode you listened to or not, and you want to go deeper into the real human people side of leadership, the messy bits, the growth moments, the development opportunities, the I hope nobody notices I'm making this up as I go kind of phase, then do come and hang out with us at the Integrity Leaders community. The website to find that is on the screen and in the show notes, but it's leadingwithintegrity.co.uk. On that website, you'll find all kinds of things. Firstly, there's a green button to join the community, so I encourage you to do that. Elsewhere, there's a resources page. You'll find my free leadership guide. You'll find some practical tools like the Heroes and Values quiz, which is a bit of fun, bit of a sci-fi flavor to that. So I recommend giving that a go. And of course, as I say, come and join the community. It's a people-first, sci-fi sort of themed leadership crew for anyone who wants to lead with more confidence, clarity, and integrity. Even if you're not calling yourself a leader yet, I'd be willing to bet you are in practice. So come and connect with leaders just like you, get the support that you wish you'd had on day one, and become the leader you wish you'd had back in the beginning of your career. Link is in the show notes. It's on the screen. And if you've got questions, drop me a message. Always happy to talk leadership and always love hearing leadership stories from listeners or viewers like yourself. Well, that's enough from me. Let's get Melissa on the show.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Melissa, welcome to Leading with Integrity. It's lovely to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much, David. I am excited about this conversation. Integrity is definitely one of my top values. So thank you.
Oh, well, you're in the right place then. Yeah. So, I mean, over to you to start with, really. Tell us a bit about yourself, your career so far, what you do, why you do it.
So I travel a lot. It's funny because before we hit record, we were talking about all of my, adventures, but I've actually really appreciated the fact that in my career, I've had the opportunity and exposure to have that global perspective. And it's also critical, I would say, to a lot of the work that I've done as an executive coach. So before I opened up my own business, I actually worked in corporations since the age of 17. Started out in financial services, and it was in New York City, and had the chance to work in London, as we were chatting about earlier. And definitely, I gained an appreciation for the different sort of values behind like work-life balance. And I say that with like major quotes because I believe that integration is probably the better way of thinking about it as a working mom myself. And so started the career at 17, worked in financial services, eventually made my way into advertising because that's really where my heart was. I really appreciated like thinking about creative professionals, creative business challenges, and just like all the ads on TV were for me at the time in the 80s, so much fun. I'm not sure if this translates across the world, but from a US perspective, we had like Wendy's commercials with this lady that kept saying like, where's the beef? And I honestly, as a little girl, had a pajama that literally said, where's the beef? And so, that thinking about advertising and just how you better understand like a consumer was something that I just held closely in the back of my mind throughout my career, because then I did work in marketing. So I got the chance to work in American Express in New York City. And it was there that I really started to understand. And obviously it just began the internet, right? So I worked in one of the departments that was really focused on delivering value via the internet from a commercial card perspective for American Express. So that was more on the client side. And so all these like gathering of experiences and all of this exposure to different leadership styles, depending on the sector, depending on the country, depending on the person's character, right? Whether they too value integrity or not, gave me an appreciation for what I would do much later on. But before I go into that side, I did go to business school. Because something that I did notice was when I dipped my toe in advertising, my clients had an MBA. And a lot of those individuals had a very different way of approaching business challenges that was a lot more structured, right? So they could kind of like pull out frameworks from like a hat. It's like, oh, we're going to do a SWOT analysis on this thing. And so they just sounded a lot more polished to me being early in my career. So I did get my business degree in the US. And again, some more international exposure because I got to work in Paris and work in advertising and on the Nescafe brand, which was really fun. So a lot of different experiences that really just led me to where I am today, which is once I became a mom, I had to make a really tough decision. I had my childcare already scheduled in my mind. It was perfect. I was like, oh, I've got this down packed. And then everything fell apart when that one person who I trusted a great deal got a better offer from the Board of Education. So I had to decide as a new mom whether I was going to continue to work in an organization that was just not built for working parents in advertising, or if I was going to bring all these experiences and create my own career coaching practice, which is what I ended up doing. So back in 2011, before coaching was so popular, I decided to keep my toe in the corporate waters and coach high level executives in terms of selling themselves to new organizations, helping them navigate stress during career transitions. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 14 years. And I realized that while we were going after these, high opportunity roles everywhere around the world, because I did my coaching practice and I still do globally and virtually, what I noticed was that life does not pause right? So one client, for example, and this is pretty extreme, but it wasn't such a rare occurrence that there was some emotional stressors in the background of a career leap. But one client had a really big interview that she worked so hard to get. She was going from one industry to a totally different industry at the time, from education to technology. And so we had prepped for 9 weeks. And at the end of the day, what happened was that the day before her interview, her dad, who has dementia, was lost. Like literally had to be found, right? And so things like that really make me empathetic to the fact that a lot of these leaders and a lot of these executives, let's say they're going into this high stakes conversation or meeting, they might have so much that they're carrying into that room with them. And then I decided that I should provide a tool to support them during those moments. And that's when I became a meditation practitioner. So for me, it was something that served lots of purposes, but one of which was, okay, people, their life, it does not pause. How can I support them? And I know for me, mindfulness as a working mother took the edge off of motherhood. And so I was starting to introduce those tools to these executives that were in the same stressful career transition moments. And in between all of this, I decided to write a book. So I wrote a book called Fertile Imagination, and that was when I felt like I was totally not creative. I had no longer access to my imagination, and it was earlier in my motherhood experience, the moments when you do not sleep. And it so happens that that was when I would get my best ideas, when my head was on the pillow, kind of like that twilight moment right before I was going to sleep. So it's obvious for anyone that's a parent that you don't have those, sacred moments quite often, right? So when would you have a chance to come up with, great ideas, or for you to even pay attention to your ideas that are coming from your imagination? So that inspired writing the book as well, Fertile Imagination. And what I did was I included a lot of case studies from people that were not just moms, because I did want to really talk to moms because that was my experience, but at the same time, people from all over the world, because I believe that right now, any leader that's listening to this, you are considering so many novel challenges. And I don't think right now is the time to limit the sources from which you can pick these great ideas. And that's why my book has people from Nigeria, people from, the UK, from the US. I mean, you name it. And I think I've kind of covered it. And the framework in terms of getting your imagination back up and running is applicable across the board, even as a leader. So for me, it's really 3 steps that I uncovered in writing my book, which was the first, reawakening the imagination, right? So if you're a leader, especially if you're a new manager on a team, it's kind of like, okay, maybe as an independent contributor, certain ways of doing things worked for you, but please be aware that now as a people leader, there are new expectations and new things that you have to really learn in order to inspire people to, run with the ideas, right? And so you need that imagination. So first, about reawakening the imagination, even as a people leader, I would say it's really about having a moment of stillness and understanding that chances are your ideas have been there, but you just haven't had a time, like any time, to listen to them because you've been so busy. Like you're new, you're trying to build your reputation, express your credibility, inspire people to do something when maybe you were their peer right before. So how is it that you can then show up, right? So it really starts with some introspection. And so that was key to some of the people that I interviewed for my book, that they took the time to understand what their limiting beliefs were, as one example. And then after that, once you give yourself a chance to hear your ideas again, right, then it's about playing with those ideas. So I interviewed leaders that are at the top. So Beth Comstock, former CMO of GE, like she herself mentioned that for her to play with her own ideas, and they could be wacky ideas, and think about the context. This is in the context of GE, right? Doesn't sound like a very wacky organization, pretty like, buttoned up and proper. But in order for her to give herself permission to actually play with some of her ideas, she would put a little Post-it note, like a little permission slip on her computer or her laptop to just like remind her, okay, I have this idea. I'll give you an example. She had an idea that I should probably pay attention to what's happening in South Korea because K-pop, I know it sounds so random, right? GE K-pop, but K-pop has such a following. So maybe I can go to a concert, see what is sticky about those experiences, why the fandom, and bring the insights back to GE and obviously make it appropriate for what her goals were at GE. So that's the playing part, right? Also in the book. And the last part is about stretching your ideas. And so that's really about telling other people this idea. So let's say, you reawakened your imagination, introspection in that moment, then you played with the idea. Beth's example, she went to South Korea. Now it's a matter of like, okay, let me tell as many people as possible so that maybe like-minded individuals can get around that idea and execute it to its max, right? So I interviewed someone named Asha Karan for my book, and she is the CEO of Giving Tuesday, which is a global initiative in terms of nonprofit and giving. And the ambition is to gather as much money as possible on one day a year. It's around the holidays from a US perspective. So, it could be something that, that initial idea that you thought was a little wacky, even as like a new people leader, and you're kind of like hesitant to take that risk. But that idea could be a complete movement, just like Asha Karan's case, whereby you have just something that has a lot more legs than just like a tiny little change in your management style. They could really change an entire organization if you're committed to it.
Absolutely. Well, lots to unpack there. Thank you for giving us the background and the framework from your book. I think that's really interesting. It's probably fair to say there's a creative common thread running through your whole career there. And I think it's something that a lot of, solopreneurs as well as new leaders and founders and people of that sort, we often, I don't want to say we struggle with creativity, but sometimes it feels like we're forced to put that like in the backseat, if you like, and it's not part of our role as much as it could be or should be. From your perspective and your experiences, what do you think are like the biggest benefits of creativity just generally, but also applying a framework such as the one in your book?
So I think, what happens is that we have this thought of what a creative person looks like, what they sound like, maybe they constantly have these brilliant ideas, and that's like the expectation that we assume we would have to hold up. And in my book, I really dedicate a chapter where I interviewed someone that it's actually really creative. Susie Batiste actually invented this solution called poopery. And so it's interesting. I guess I'll explain what it is. But if you go to the bathroom and it smells, Susie Batiste came up with a solution to resolve that. And so she's made millions upon millions of dollars, bringing her unique perspective and her ideas and creativity to the market. All of that to say, when I interviewed Susie, something that popped up was, okay, Susie is a creative human being, and she's like, definitely well known in her space. But then I started thinking, what about me? Like, what's my relationship with creativity? And so in my book, I really just encourage readers or anyone listening here too, as you're listening, to just start from that place. It's like, okay, wait, before I go and try to be like someone that maybe I don't think I am, right? So it's not like faking it till you making it. Really just think to yourself, like, were you told maybe when you were a kid, like you're not creative, put down those crayons? Or maybe you had a great idea, as an independent contributor or even now as a new manager, and that idea was just like poo-pooed upon, to kind of go with the idea of Susie Batiste, right? And so, you've got all these like prior experiences that really inform whether or not you think you're creative. So that would be the first step, really understanding where do you stand versus creativity. And where I stood, and I write about in the book, was I felt like if I'm creative once, then, oh my gosh, how am I going to keep up with the expectation that I'm consistently creative? Like that's like my deep, deep fear. And I know that anyone listening, that might be one thing on your mind. But I would say the following. Right now, when you think about AI and when you think about, the market dynamics right now, there are so many novel challenges that if you do not find a way to make peace with your relationship with whether or not you're creative, you can lose. Like that's just like the straight up truth, right? So right now, I think what's important is, really understanding that there's some things that you can use to your advantage in order to actually help you be more creative in a less intimidating way. So one thing as an example, a lot of organizations have these like resource constraints, right? So let's say you have a layoff and at one point you had 3 people doing 3 distinct jobs and now you only have one person and it's, you. Unfortunately. So it's like, okay, in that scenario, how can I be creative with the resources that I have? Right. And a lot of times, some of the best solutions have been because there were constraints. It's like, oh God, like I might not have a canvas and a paintbrush, but like, can I do something with, pasta sauce or something and a piece of paper? Right. The other thing I would say is, it's really important to understand that creativity, using your imagination, it has its own energy that doesn't necessarily require your right brain, right? And so, and I mean, I guess I know a little bit too much about the right brain, left brain, but I know around the world, there's that thinking that the right brain is more logical, right? So if you're in a business setting, maybe that's what you're surrounded by a bit more often. But, here's the thing. In terms of creativity, it almost feels like it comes from somewhere else. And you have to really relax in order for your best ideas to come to the table, right? You have to almost do something completely different. And when you do, that is when some ideas will, pop up. For me personally, and I wrote it in my book, creativity is also its own source of energy. So when I feel excited about an idea or an idea pops up for me, I actually feel more lit up than a Christmas tree. Like I actually feel like I have more energy and enthusiasm about whatever it is that I'm doing next. So there's so many benefits, not just in terms of coming up with better ideas, because that's the other side of it. And so in my book, there is this idea that, again, I interviewed people that were moms, but then also not moms. So I'm very big on talking to people that have very different experiences than your own. So maybe creativity doesn't look like coming up with a new marketing campaign, but maybe it looks like every single week scheduling a networking Zoom call with somebody that's outside of your functional area of expertise, right? So it's really about exposing yourself to different perspectives and exposing yourself to different solutions, even outside of your sector, outside of your country, and bringing it back to wherever you need to bring it back to in order to solve the problems that you need to solve. But right now, with the advent of AI and right now with the market dynamics being so volatile in certain sectors, I don't see a world where creativity, is not needed. Like creativity is going to help you win, and without the creativity, then, I mean, I see market share just eroding and just being eaten by, competitors if you're going to do the same thing over and over. It's a really, that's the bigger risk, not being creative.
And I think sometimes it's even just down to like simple things like our understanding of what creativity is. So I think a lot of, and you mentioned this example yourself earlier, particularly like school years when you're told, put the pencil or the paintbrush down, you're rubbish at art, you're not a creative person, that sort of thing. And that happened to me, and I'm okay with it. I'm not an artist by any stretch, and I'm fine with that. But that's not what creativity is exclusively. It's not just about whether you can draw a picture or play an instrument or even do a design or something like that. It can be about more than that. It can be about ideas, about patterns of thought, about the way you do a certain process or the way you use a technology even. And I think we put ourselves in a limited box when we talk about creativity quite a lot. And when actually, you could be quite creative and not realize it.
Yeah. And, there's even creativity with numbers.
Mm-hmm.
It's so funny. Like my mind goes straight to like bad creativity with numbers.
Yeah, me too. I was going to say, you don't want your accountant to be creative with those, though, do you?
No, but you would want your accountant to just be, thoughtful in terms of, okay, no stone unturned, right? In
Mm-hmm.
terms of cost savings and new regulations and all of that good stuff. But you can be creative even in a very analytical role. I think as a people leader, for example, I think at the end of the day, you might have a team of like 5. I'm just making up a random number. And let's say that, one particular way that you articulate your vision for that year's goal, resonates with like 2 out of those 5 people. Well, here's an opportunity for you to be creative. Might there be another way that you articulate that vision so that the other 3 people, really buy into your vision? And you've got to be really like, agile from that perspective. And you have to just iterate your approach. And that is creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, another example, I guess, springs to mind because of the COVID effect, I suppose, but the remote and hybrid work and patterns of work and time of work and all that sort of thing. And whether you as the leader, the manager can be flexible enough that every individual within your team is able to work where, when, and how best suits them without you just making like an arbitrary decision of, I don't know, everyone's in the office 9 to 5 or everyone's remote and I want you to work between 6 and 7 or whatever it might be. But having that sort of flexibility and taking creative approaches, but in a way that the job still gets done. And usually, I think, it gets done better and faster in those situations. But anyway, let's maybe not get into the politics of that.
Absolutely. And I think right now it's funny because like with the return to work or return to office policies, a lot of people are concerned about that, right? It's kind of like, oh, wait, am I going to be like micromanaged again? And at the same time, it's like the trust, right? How is it that you rebuild that trust irrespective of new requirements that maybe not everyone was accustomed to? Like, I'm actually grateful that I was working during a time when remote work was not even a thought in my mind. Like it could, so I'm grateful. But for any generation that never worked at a physical place, I mean, it's very new approach. And I think it's going to require a lot of quote unquote onboarding from a return to office perspective.
Yeah, I'm sort of the same. So I've been fortunate that I've done both. I don't know. I don't know if it says more about the specific places where I worked as opposed to just like office culture generally. But I found there was as much good as there was bad about it. Yes, it's great to be around the team and have like instant, easy access to people to pick their brain or just have conversation. There's that social aspect that can be important, but also there's all of the noise. There's all of the micromanagement. There's the disruptions. There's especially open offices as well. I feel like that's like the worst invention of the Western world is the open plan office.
Mm-hmm.
It's really difficult to do like focused, deep, effective work in those kind of situations. And I do feel like remote work is way better for that. So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that kind of ties into the whole like employee wellness conversation in the sense that, are you kind of requiring your employees to like burn, what is it, at both ends of the candlestick or something like
Indeed.
that.
Yeah.
Because if I'm honest, here's the reality. Like when I left working on the agency side, this again was a long time ago, but 2011, I recall that me and colleagues said, okay, we're in an open environment, which it was. It was cool. It was in Dumbo, Brooklyn, which is super cool. And it was a bunch of individuals that were earlier in their career. Really, I was the first pregnant person I think that I know of that had maternity leave in this office. But for me and my colleagues, we did our, meetings obviously on site, but we did our deep work at home. So what does that mean? That means that you go home with a one pager that you have to then write, right? So that's interesting. I wrote right. But at the same time, it's like, I hope that it doesn't get to that place, where people are doing their, admin work, thoughtless sort of work at the office, because that's what you're capable of doing given the environment. What I do know is because a lot of the office space was returned after the pandemic, there are smaller spaces that a lot of organizations and people are going to have to navigate. And so from an employee wellness perspective, my position is that if you're going to require individuals to go back to the office, then make sure the people that are there, they're there for a reason, right? So give them some sort of support there on site. Because I think it would be a little bit disingenuous, in my opinion, to say, oh, we're going to help your mental well-being using like virtual solutions. And it's like, isn't that interesting, right? Like you already know employees are going to be thinking like, isn't that interesting? I do this on my time at home, but I have to, deliver in person. So I think the human touch has an opportunity to kind of support people in terms of navigating like all those distractions in the open space environment and all the new logistics they now have to like rejigger, which again, all of that requires, creative thinking a lot of times. And sometimes, the best laid out plans are not necessarily what happen. But again, it's an opportunity, and at the end of the day, a lot of companies are making it a requirement, right? So it's like people have to make some tough choices.
Yeah, and I think that's where people are going wrong with it. Is the requirement, the mandatory versus, I don't think there's ever going to be like a blanket rule for this sort of thing. It should be about like creative ways of dealing with it. It should be about that flexibility we talked about just now. It should be a conversation, not like a top down diktat or whatever. It's if you genuinely care about your employees, about their well being, about their outputs even, and ultimately about the bottom line of your company, then, making these sweeping statements like everyone is back to the office full time because of the culture or whatever, we've lost our culture since we started working remotely. That's the one I hear a lot.
Yeah.
At least half of those employees don't want to be back in the office. At least half. So when you're saying it's about culture, that's an obvious and immediate lie, because if you're forcing people to be in a place they don't want to be, that's not going to help your culture. Like anyone can see that. That doesn't need a lot of thought, does it?
No. And honestly, I think, at this point, it's like, top leadership can say what they want to say, to be honest, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like, I know an organization, for example, they're going to have a return to office policy mandated on a very precise date. And basically, you are given a package if you are not interested in showing up to work full time on that date. You have that option. So that's kind of like the alternative. I know from a working parent's perspective, it is a huge strain to now have to figure out new logistics. And it's not just like mechanical, it is also emotional. And so what I would say there is that, there's going to be, I think, some sort of divider between I think, between people that have kids, especially young kids, and then people that maybe, uh, don't. I suspect that a lot of working moms will probably make the decision to stay home if those requirements are implemented, just across the board, no excuses, too bad for you kind of perspective. As a people leader or a new people leader, I think, what's most important is to be transparent. I say that with like a ton of grain of salt, like the biggest like salt cubes in the universe or whatever they have. Because I know that you can't share so much information at a certain timing. And I know the sensitivity of information flow in big organizations, having worked there myself. But at the same time, it's like, well, if you are expecting someone to go all in on business goals and you are compensating them, but the compensation didn't change now that they're going back to the office, it's like, at least, give them the dignity, the opportunity to make that choice, as early as possible. Because there's also a lot of anxiety when it comes to looking for a new career, a new job. And that transition can be honestly brutal. Speaking as someone that has coached people for 14 years on exactly that pattern, it can be very, very brutal. So
I think it might vary by industry as well. I think there's going to be certain industries that it's going to be almost the expectation that it's a remote job. And I think, companies in those kind of sectors they're going to fail to attract or retain the best people if they go down this route. But then, looking at it from the other perspective as well, full-time remote, I mean, for a lot of people, that became quite oppressive anyway, because that line between home and work blurred. They were probably working longer hours than they had before because the commute is like walk upstairs or go into the next room instead of an hour on the train or in the car or whatever it was. And so the employers effectively benefited from that because they were getting extra work time. And then also it's a lot easier, isn't it? Like if you're sat in your own home, if you're in the office and it goes to 5 o'clock, you may be, okay, well, it's time to go now, end of the day. I'll close down, I'll stop what I'm doing, I'll pick it up tomorrow. Whereas if they're at home, they're already probably comfortable. I would assume people are comfortable in their own home anyway. I am. And you're like, well, I know it's 5 o'clock, but, just another hour and I'll be finished with this. And then I don't have to work on it tomorrow. I might as well just do it. And it's done. And again, like the employers are getting that benefit. So it's, I can see both sides of it to an extent. But then another argument is by forcing people back to the office, they're losing that benefit as well. So I don't know. I don't think economically, financially, for the majority of businesses, if your workforce is capable of working remotely, it has to make more sense for you, for the bottom line of your business, to allow them to do it for all of these reasons we've talked about. And yet, so many are deciding not to. And I don't really understand the true reasons behind it a lot of the time.
I think sometimes it's just in lieu of a restructuring and another way to kind of like lay people off, basically. I'm not saying like the extreme, but I know one organization that's pretty big that is kind of making it like, a filtering process of sorts. But at the same time, I would say that if someone is a new people leader and now they're like leading people, physically, like on site versus remote, again, I go back to make it worth it, and that's where I think a human centered approach is going to win versus something that's a bit more cold and just like, virtual and static or whatever, stagnant. So I think in terms of, really building those relationships with the different individuals on the team, I think really understanding to the best of your ability, like their real intentions in terms of for themselves and their career and their life, more holistically. All of this in the context of politics. And obviously not everyone's going to share anything and people will lie. These are all facts of life. But at least if you go in there with the intention of, okay, I just made you change your weekly habits. I just made you no longer able to read a bedtime story to your kids, Monday through Friday, as an example, when in the past, this for 5 years you've been doing it. I need to make it worth your time, right? And again, I am speaking as a human. If an organization's ambition is to just keep the organization going, right, then that is a whole different conversation. And that goes down to the bottom line, to your point. That is no longer so much a human endeavor, right? That's just like, okay, profit, loss, and all of that good stuff. But if your intention as a leader is to be a compassionate leader, a servant leader, what is it? Team player, how they have like that little, is it team coach, player, whatever, leader? Like if your intention is to put some sort of like adjective before the noun of leader, then I think you have to approach these moments of transition, return to office transition, in light of the sort of leader that you intend to be. Right? So it can't just be something that you say, but you're not, demonstrating in some sort of like black and white way. Right? So I think that's the opportunity to start thinking, okay, how can I be authentic, but then also just super honest with, okay, this is the kind of leader I wanted to be. Maybe this was the kind of leader that inspired me earlier, and got me to where I am today. So what does that look like now that everyone is back to the office? How can I actually live this kind of leadership so that my reputation in an organization is clear and consistent and in integrity with what my ambition is in my career, and I think there were some leaders that I've, been around that I was so like smitten about. And I say that in a very like politically correct, totally like platonic, oh my gosh, these people are just amazing leaders sort of way. I'll give an example. So, Shelley Lazarus, she was the CEO of Ogilvy and Mather, and I worked for Ogilvy and Mather, an advertising agency, global. And she was a mom, and she had 4 kids, and her husband was a pediatrician. And so the way they made it work, as per interviews that were online, was that, her husband was kind of like the primary caretaker of their 4 children. And so both of them had, very like high expectations jobs, obviously, like if you're a doctor or if you're leading a global agency conglomerate, but they figured out how to still tap into their professional ambitions. And again, this is before remote ever was a thing. And I really think that with Shelley, like she wasn't just acting like a working mom. Like she literally was not hiding that she had, a family at home. I think she even had a conversation with the David Ogilvy, who actually, commented, hey, Shelley, you might want to like, use your full extent of maternity leave or something at one point. This is way before my time. This is totally books that I read because when I worked for Ogilvy, I was like all over the library and, just learning as much as possible. It was so much fun. But Shelley Lazarus, as an example, to me was a leader I could look up to as a working mom. It was like, oh, wait, she didn't lose her humanity. She didn't hide that she was a mother. She was super badass. And she really stayed consistent, very high integrity in terms of the way that she led her team. And she also helped people feel like they were adults, right? So she empowered people to take their ideas to the finish line. And I think all of that, boils down to whatever in her mind's eye, she was trying to basically create in terms of her aura as a leader. Like, I don't know the adjective she put before, leader, but what I know is how I felt when I was in her presence. I actually met her one time. I was in an elevator or a lift and I was so intimidated by her. I didn't even say hi. It was just me and her. She had on like, I think it was like a, what is it, St. John's or some saint whatever, like suit from like the 80s or whatever. This was like in the 2000s. And I was so intimidated by her presence that I just, I just stayed in the lift, like without saying a word. But she was just so, like I said, powerful, and she lived her brand. I can't articulate exactly how she would have articulated her brand. But what I know is that what I felt was that she was honest. It's like, no, I'm a working mom. I am what I am. And so that for me, it translated in terms of her behavior and her outward, display of saying, no, I have 4 kids. My husband is the one that, takes care of them as the primary caretaker. And I'm here to do the work when I'm here and I'm present.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. Everything you just said about like the human first sort of approach. And the reason I mentioned the bottom line earlier is because I thought, and maybe this is an unfair assumption on my part, but I feel like a lot of the return to office narrative, whether culture is the excuse or not or whatever, I feel like at the core of it, it's because those business leaders believe their organizations will be more effective if people are full-time present on premises in the office, whatever it is. And I just don't believe that, which is why I use it as an argument. Like, first thing is do the right thing by the people. And secondly, if that also happens to be better financially for your business, then is that not just yet another reason to do it? But anyway, and great story about a former leader as well. It's a great example as well of like that integrity piece and authenticity and being able to be yourself, be transparent appropriately, and still be effective as a leader and as an employee ultimately. So thank you for sharing that. So I think, we've talked around this a little bit already, but a lot of what we've talked about is kind of touches on these big disruptions to our lives, to our careers, whatever they might be, whether it's COVID or deciding to have kids and have maternity leave or, redundancies even as well. So, I mean, for people struggling with those sort of moments of transition in life, let's call them, but they still want to perform at work, they're being asked to be more creative, they need to be innovative in what they're doing as well. What would be your top tips for people finding themselves in that sort of situation?
So I think it begins with a mindset, right? So it's kind of like, not how is this or not is this going to work, right? That's like yes or no. It's more like how can I make this work? So starting from a place of, seeking solutions for this complicated moment in time. I think it's also in terms of just how you feel about uncertainty. And I know that if you have spent your entire career really working for an organization where certain things are established and certain things are just solid knowns, I know that this is particularly difficult for a lot of individuals in that sort of, frame of thinking. So what's really important is to find some sort of anchor, some sort of, okay, I have a habit, I have a routine, I have a daily practice that is consistent, right? It could be something as extreme as, and let's say you're going through a moment of transition and you're trying to figure out how to like produce your best work ever. It could be as simple as, going to the gym and working out, at 6 a.m. every single day, Monday through Friday at the same exact place. It could be that. It could be having a meditation practice that you're just putting a YouTube video and you sit there and you light up a candle, and that's the way that you begin your mornings right before, like a morning meeting or something like that. So it's really about for yourself finding an anchor that you can at least say to yourself, okay, yes, today might go sideways. However, what I do know is going to take place is that, at this time, I'm going to be doing this, I'm going to be there, and I'm going to then, move on to the next sort of step in my day. So I think there's got to be a bit of a anchor to everyone's day to kind of get to that solid feeling in your own body. And so as a meditation practitioner, what I would say is if you have these little sort of routines or, okay, I know what to expect at 1 o'clock every day, find a way to infuse them in an otherwise chaotic, work experience. So that would be one major tip right there. I think the other side of it is that we might have these ambitious goals or they're imposed on us, right? If you're working for someone and you're a new people leader and the market is just haywire, and you have these goals, and chances are you're going to put an enormous amount of energy in pursuit of that goal. What I would really encourage you to do is in equal measures, and I'm saying this 1,000 times, and I hope everyone across the pond and beyond hears this, in equal measures, find a way to fill your cup. Now, from a, high-powered, intense executive that is leading a team and has this big, hairy, audacious goal, what that might look like for you could be a little different than for someone that has a more doable goal. So, for example, if in the course of the day you have to make 25 outbound sales calls, as an example, well, I encourage you to find a way to fill the cup that you just emptied with those 25 sales calls such that you are re-energizing yourself or filling your reservoir of energy and motivation and inspiration. So it can look like you doing something that is, it might on the outside seem aggressive, but it might be really like filling. So like doing rock climbing, right? Or bouldering. I don't know if that translates across the world, but a wall with things that you're grabbing onto and you're climbing. Again, that's physical. So I tend to like things that are a bit more like physical, but you could do something again that is in equal measures to your output, that fills your cup. And it could be something like, meditating or something, or it could be going and doing yoga or whatever kind of floats your boat. But I want to say, as someone that was raised in New York City and worked in a corporate environment since 17, this has been a challenge for me. I have always wanted to see what's the edge. How far can I go before I'm like at that point of like exploding or imploding, but it has not panned out. So for example, when I wrote my book, I saw the edge. I said, oh, this is the edge. And what happened was that a little nerve ending in my neck ended up kind of somehow affecting me because I was sitting for like 12 hours at my desk editing my manuscript. And that required me to do physical therapy for a year. So that is why I say this with such passion. So in equal measures, fill your cup. Don't get to the point of me. This is an endurance race. This is not like a sprint. And I would say, like another sort of thing that is helpful if you're going through a very messy, life experience or just a lot of, transition in the office is to really make sure that you tell your whole support network at home what your priority is during this time frame so that you do not feel guilty when you have to go to that meeting, not be at dinner time or whatever, not make dinner, right? Too bad, right? It's like order some takeout food. So yeah, it's like, I think that's the other side of it. I know as a working mom, for example, and I'm not sure because I have asked my husband this, but there's this guilt, it's like, oh, right now, I'm trying to build my book of business. Goodness gracious, am I going to get my kids, French fries or whatever? And I feel guilty because it's like, oh, the seed oils. And I go down this whole spiral. Like, am I malnourishing my children? I know it sounds horrible, but this is sometimes what we do to ourselves when we have that overwhelm, right? You just feel overwhelmed. So if you are facing a very tough moment, I definitely think you need to tell your support network, which is people at home or people that you trust. And I mean outside of the organization and just tell them like, look, I am not trying to offend you when I say no to going to, dinner events with you or to this or that or the other because I'm focused on this one particular goal. That idea I got from Jesse Itzler. And so he's famous from a US perspective. His wife created Spanx.
I mean, there's some great advice there. I love the reframe at the beginning from if to how. That's a really powerful one. I think we can apply that all over our lives, no doubt. For the other two, I mean, there's a couple of common themes coming out there that we hear quite a bit when we're talking about burnouts and avoiding that, like knowing where the line or the brick wall is, as I call it, before you run straight into it. And I love that idea of like filling your cup, or like the cliche that always pops into my mind on this one is like a change is as good as a rest. So, for me, it'd be video gaming or something like that, or, going out for drinks with friends, something as simple as that.
Whatever works.
But yeah, I think the point about sitting as well, like they say, sitting is the new smoking, don't they, these days? So, that's why I have a standing desk, which I'm standing at right now. But then I also quite like sitting. So I have a sitting desk over there too. And I swap between them, like, because sometimes it's nice, isn't it, to just have that change of perspective, literally. And it's quite a good one. So yeah, thank you for sharing those tips. Very useful. I think knowing where that wall is, though, I think that'll probably be my pick for the top one, because it's, for those of us who are or have been workaholics at some point in our career or other, it's really difficult to know when to stop sometimes, isn't it? And when you go into business by yourself, that gets so much worse, because you don't have that sort of fallback of, well, if I don't do this, someone else will. Or, if I'm sick, or if I have to go and do something else, or I need to go and be with family for whatever reason, I know this will get picked up. You don't have that anymore. You don't have that sort of that safety net, if you like. And so I think that in a lot of cases makes it even worse and even harder to know when to stop. And I think that's why we see burnout on the rise in founders and business owners as well as employees themselves. So yeah, it's a great bit of advice. What would you say are the most common mistakes that leaders make, and how can we avoid making them?
So what I've heard consistently from my clients who are looking for new opportunities is that what worked for them was keeping people in the loop of an idea earlier in the process than might be expected. So basically, if you're going to rely on people to execute this amazing idea, it would be way easier if you had them aware of the idea super early and also inform the idea so that they feel like there's a sense of ownership. And so anyone that does not do that that's the error right there. That's the big mistake, because oftentimes it's just harder to get people to do something to the best of their abilities if they feel like no buy-in. And if in the back of their mind, they're like, oh, gee, it would have been nice to, share my insights, because maybe, I'm talking to the customer all the time, and like, that is not what they want. You know what I mean? Like I've heard that all the time. And that actually ends up being, when I prepare people for job interviews, that ends up being like one of the things that they do well. And so that's why I'm telling you that from a mistake perspective, a lot of folks are banking on the fact that that doesn't happen all the time. So that's why I would see it as like a pretty big leadership mistake. And it's not always like intentional. It's not always like, oh, I want to keep operations out of this, or I want to keep marketing out of this. It's not that. Sometimes it's just, this hesitation. It's like, oh, I already took this idea to, so far, like, I don't want to like have this person then say, oh, it sucks, or like, we got to change it, or because there's a little bit of like ego in that, right? It's like, oh, but it was my idea and I'm almost like married to the idea. But I think it really pays off at the end of the day when you do bring in the right people early in the process. There is a lot of wisdom that is not captured if it's just, you and like some other individuals that maybe haven't had that customer or client interaction in years because of your seniority. And so I think it really is something to watch out for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times it's like they don't tell people because they think they already know what they'll say. Like, oh, I don't need to ask David because I know what he'll think about this. It's fine. Or I know what he'll think about this and I don't want to hear it.
Yeah. And you know what? Let me just, little relationship advice. The same happens between couples. So, that's just a warning. Like, make sure people are on board as early as possible. Just saying, at home or at work.
Definitely. I feel like I've got no data to back this up, but I feel like that's probably the top reason why these big change management programs fail is because they don't communicate early enough. They don't go for that buy-in at the right point. And you're right, it's about ownership. Like people aren't going to feel, they're not going to feel any ownership. They're not going to be bought into something if it's like lumped on them at the last minute. People don't like being blindsided, whatever context it is really.
Absolutely.
Maybe there's a minority of people who love the surprise, but
I don't know them, but okay. What people to them? Good surprises we like, bonuses and salary increases. Yeah. Surprise forever. Sure.
Yeah. No, that's probably a good example of when you don't want to hear early. Like, we're going to give you a pay rise in 5 years' time. You're going to be happy about that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then that 5-year time frame horizon is when, you plan your career steps. Just saying.
Yeah. That's great news. I'll be gone by then.
Or I'll leave exactly the day after, year 5.
If you could go back in time, how far in your own life would you go? And what would you say to your younger self?
Back in time, how far would I go? It would probably be when I first saw this TV show, Who's the Boss? I think I was maybe 8 years old or something. And I was inspired by a TV show to even wonder about what it would be like to work in advertising and live in Connecticut. And I live in Connecticut, by the way, and I had worked in advertising. And so it might sound like super like fickle that like a little girl's like looking at TV or looking at the telly and getting inspired for her career in her life. But what I would have told that little girl back when I was 7 is, you know what, Melissa, what you're seeing on TV, you're going to actually live it. That'd be dope. I think I would have just been like, oh my goodness, an angel fell from the sky and just said, this is happening. And I think I would have just been more excited, about like what was ahead for me.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I like that. That's a good answer. Yeah, I mean, TV and the advertising industry, I don't know. I mean, the only one I can think of is Mad Men, and I don't think that would make anyone want to work in the industry, apart from like mid-40s men, maybe.
It's true.
Very cool. Okay, so last question. This one's my favorite. It's called Leadership Heroes.
Leadership Heroes.
So if you had to pick one person, but it could be like anyone you can think of, so they could be alive or dead, past or present, real or even fictitious, but someone who, in your opinion, would perfectly embody leadership, who would that be for you and why?
So I had used Shelley Lazarus, but I already said her earlier. So I am going to go with my dad. And here's why. So he worked in the liquor and wine sales business for like 40 something years. And he decided that he would teach his daughters how to talk to strangers. And so under his leadership or requirement, I would have to go to, this was before the internet and before Waze and GPS, I would have to go inside of gas stations or petrol stations and ask the clerk how to get from point A to B or C or D. A lot. Like for some reason, my dad was just not very trusting of the prior clerk. So then again, we would stop at a petrol station or a gas station, and I would have to go and initiate the conversation and ask for very detailed directions. And the reason why I would pick my dad is because he didn't really give me something that was proven, right? And I think a really good leader is willing to take a risk on trusting that the employee or the person that they're leading can somehow figure it out, and maybe that can become a new capability for them. And so the same can be said of my dad. Like, there was nothing about me, because I was quite quiet at the time, being a little girl, that would compel anyone to have me talking to strangers and asking them for really important information, right? How to get from point A to B, and then how to like write out on a little loose leaf paper the exact little map, because again, no internet. So he trusted me too with that information. Or did he, right? Because I did say we kept going to different gas stations or petrol stations. So for me, it would be my dad, from that perspective, from a personal perspective, because I still do the same thing now, and I've done it for my own children. I've had them go to different amusement parks and literally ask for the kind of discount that they can get in order to gain admission, and they get to keep the difference basically between like the ticket price and the discount they got. So it's a little different. I didn't really get anything out of my little excursions with the petrol person, but I think it's a sign of leadership. And I think as a parent, you can also exhibit different leadership abilities. And I think they can be just as inspiring.
Yeah, it's something around leadership and like developing your people, isn't it? Which I think is, I don't know. I mean, I say a lot of things are the most important thing about leadership, but this feels like it's consistently in the top three, let's say. And sometimes that means putting people out of their comfort zone, but within like guardrails that are there as well. So it's walking that difficult line, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people, like, if they're not pushed outside that comfort zone, they'll stay there. Hence the name comfort zone, I suppose.
Yeah, I would say my dad was definitely one to push me outside of my comfort zone all the time, all the time. And before my time, notice I was a little girl, like
Yeah.
it's like no mercy. But that was the parenting of the time,
Yeah. But I bet he didn't need the directions though. I bet he knew where he was going anyway.
No, I think he really didn't know where he was going. Like, I promise you, David, like, he did not know where he was going. And
I
any
don't know.
listener out there, like, he was just not, how like mice in mazes, they kind of generally know where they're going? No, my dad legitimately, even today, it's like GPS is not enough. He will still stop at gas stations and ask for like confirmation. It's the reassurance that he needs, I think.
Okay. Maybe he just likes talking to me.
That I agree. But I didn't need to talk to so many clerks.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like it's a good life skill to have, though.
100%.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that story. That's a bit of a different take on it than we normally get, so I appreciate that. Yeah. So I will ask you one final smaller question, which is if anyone in the audience would like to learn more about you, perhaps work with you, get a copy of your book, etc., where can they go to learn more?
I would definitely suggest you go to LinkedIn. So go to LinkedIn, find my first and last name, Melissa Llarena. You can see it right on the screen if you're watching the video. Melissa Llarena. Definitely tell me that you're a friend of the show, and I will accept the connection. I like talking to strangers. You just heard the clerk story. If you're interested in purchasing the book, Fertile Imagination, especially if you're a working parent, definitely worth checking out. It's everywhere that you would purchase a book. And by that, I mean it includes Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. I don't know if Dimmicks has it too in Australia. Like, I don't know what they have in the UK from a bookstore perspective. But if you go on Amazon, it shall be there.
Great. Well, we do have Amazon. I wouldn't say it's the last bookshop left in the UK, but it's certainly killing the high street off at a pretty rapid pace, even today. Which I feel is sad. There's something about an old bookshop with physical books in it, isn't there? But,
I'm addicted to bookstores. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm surrounded by shelves filled with books. You can only see one of them, but yeah. Anyway, gone off topic again, haven't I? Melissa, thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed this conversation. You've shared some wonderful stories with us as well. So thank you again so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too, David.
Melissa, thank you so much for your time today. Great conversation. Some really interesting stories from your career there as well. So thank you for sharing all of that. Listener or viewer, I hope you learned plenty there about creativity and fostering innovation. And we touched on remote work as well, which I didn't expect, but loads of great, important nuggets there to dig into, plenty to learn, and hopefully it's sparked a bit of thought process in your mind. If you would like to learn more about Melissa and the work that she does, do check those show notes. All the links are there. Click on the thing, learn the stuff, as I always say. Very vague, I know, but you'll figure it out. In a world where new managers are thrown into leadership at warp speed, often without warning, where feedback sometimes feels like the boss fight at the end of a game you didn't really want to be playing, and burnout lurks round every corner, one leader searches for answers and discovers a crew. That leader could be you. Welcome to the Integrity Leaders community. If you're listening to this podcast, whether you like it or not, you're part of our community already. So you might as well formalize it, click on the link and come and join up. Get access to more leadership resources. Join a community of other leaders where people-first leadership meets just a hint of sci-fi adventure. So whether you're a first-time manager, a founder forging your own starship, or a leader trying not to go full red alert every Monday morning at 9:01, you belong here in our community at Integrity Leaders. You can join for free as a leadership explorer. You can take the first step along your leadership development journey by signing up for the new leader paid tier, or you can take the helm, become a member of the bridge crew. All the details are on that sign up page. Visit the website, link is in the show notes and on the screen. Click that green button, sign up today. Choose your path, find your crew, and start leading with integrity, not ego, not panic, not imposter feelings. Your leadership journey starts in those show notes. So to borrow a phrase from a favourite Star Trek captain, make it so. Thank you for listening today. I hope you'll be back again tomorrow for our third daily episode for Christmas week. And I'll be talking learning and development, leadership mindset, and more with my next guest, Simon Hosapfel. Until then, be a leader, not a boss.